I think it'll resonate with fans. It feels like how it should feel. That's the Venom you want to see in a movie. As a true fan of the character, like as soon as you see him in the trailer, you're gonna be like, yep, they got it right. That's what I want to go see. I want to see that guy just go be badass. And so that's what he does. And I think they'll be really happy.
You serious?
Let me start by saying I didn't want Venom to fail. Quite the contrary, actually. I wanted it to succeed more than any other motion picture I planned to see for the rest of the year. As a childhood fan of Marvel comic books, I especially looked forward to any and every TV show surrounding the characters from those comics, especially the cheesy 90s cartoons of Spider-Man and X-Men, the latter of which has one of the best opening themes I've ever heard in any TV show. I was one of those kids at Walmart who begged my mom to buy every Spider-Man VHS cassette tape I could find, and one of those tapes happened to feature the character Venom.
He never triggered my spider sense. Such low-grade weapon. Here, have some of mine. Now, don't worry. We're not gonna finish you yet, Parker.
I was instantly blown away by how dark and mysterious the character was, and how much more violent he was compared to Spider-Man. I was so happy to see a character that could finally stand up to him as an equal, possibly as someone even stronger. And at the same time, I was enthralled by the struggles that Eddie Brock went through to overcome the temptations of the symbiote as it took over his body and mind. From the day I saw Venom, I was hooked. I waited a long time for Marvel to take Venom to the next level in a live-action feature adaptation. Sony's Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, came along, and that didn't happen. Well, that's fine. I guess Green Goblin had a pretty huge following, so no big deal. We'll just wait and see what happens with the next movie. Well, along comes a Spider-Man 2, and what do you know? No Venom. At this point, I was seething with anticipation. So many years had passed, I wondered if we were ever going to see a live-action version of Venom. Then, Spider-Man 3 was announced, featuring not one, not two, but 3 major villains. And lo and behold, Venom was finally going to get his big screen debut. I had just entered high school when that was announced, a far cry when I was just a little tyke buying VHS tapes while shopping with his mom. I went into the theater, got my seat, and had to pinch myself because at long last, I was going to see Venom. And then the movie played.
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
Honey, bring me my BC headache powder and a glass of water.
I don't think disappointed is the right word to describe how let down I was. While I didn't hate the movie as much as everyone else did, I was not convinced at all that the Venom on screen was the Venom I expected to see. I was convinced that fans would never see a truly authentic representation of Venom on film, so I put the character out of my mind. Fast forward 10 years later, and things have changed. Marvel had been bought by Disney, one of the most successful film franchises of all time had been established, and through it all, Sony still retained the film rights to Spider-Man, as well as characters in the Spider-Man lore. Not wanting to turn down the chance to follow Marvel's coattails, Sony announced they would be developing their own Marvel universe, beginning with a full-fledged, honest-to-God, 100% bona fide Venom movie. I almost thought it was too good to be true, especially when they announced Tom Hardy of all people would be playing the character Eddie Brock. But sure enough, it was booked for an October 5th, 2018 release date. And once I fully convinced myself that this was indeed a real thing, I waited in anticipation once more for the film's release date. The first teaser trailer released during the Super Bowl season, and this was when I started to see the problems. Are you kidding me? How do you release a trailer for a superhero movie, or supervillain movie depending on how you look at it, without featuring the main character? All we get is Tom Hardy having a seizure and a cheeky grin at the end as if to say, "Fool you!" Even though it was only a teaser, the complete lack of special effects save for the symbiote in the beginning didn't get me hyped at all. It literally felt like Sony took unfinished footage from the cutting room floor, slathered up some symbiotic goo, and pasted it all together to make it into a trailer. Things got even worse when the second trailer released, this time an official trailer accurately showcasing the movie's story, the action, and of course a proper look at Venom. Everything was all well and good until I saw the line, "Embrace your inner anti-hero." Embrace your inner anti-hero.
I'm not a bad guy. I'm not a good guy. I'm the guy.
Who the hell says anti-hero in a public film trailer? That'd be like if I made a fantasy game trailer and I narrated something like "Follow the protagonist's journey." It'd be one thing if instead the trailer said "Embrace your inner demons." Sure, it would have been cliche, but at least it wouldn't be cringeworthy. But man, I haven't even talked about the third trailer yet. All I can say is, man, oh man, the dialogue is painful.
I'm Eddie Brock. I'm a reporter. I always seem to find myself questioning something the government may not be looking at. I found something really bad.
We will eat both your arms and then both of your legs, and then we will eat your face right off your head. You will be this armless, legless, faceless thing, won't you? Rolling down the street like a turd in the wind.
Am I dead yet?
I would have been enraged had I not been so confused at the fact that Hollywood still hasn't found a way to make Tom Hardy's voice sound clear. Half the time, I can't tell if he's supposed to be using an American accent or if that squeak is actually the way he talks. It makes it hard to understand him at times, and it's a shame because he's a talented actor. But back to Venom. The marketing and hype leading to this film's release was anything but stellar. The film's director, Ruben Fleischer, was hard at work toying with fans' emotions. At first, when Venom was announced, it was expected that Venom would be rated R. Well, Deadpool and Logan have proved that you can have both PG-13 and R-rated flicks in the same universe and still make lots of money doing it, and the idea of having an authentic, unrestrained version of Venom on the big screen was music to everyone's ears. Certainly mine, anyway. So far, so good. As the months passed leading to Venom's release, Ruben began to distance himself from fans' worries that an R rating had not yet been formally confirmed by Sony, and after much insistence from the fans' behalf, this is what he had to say. Our movie wants to honor the comics as close as we can tonally. In the comics, he bites people's heads off and eats brains. It would be weird to make a movie with Venom if he wasn't doing that. We tried to honor it as closely as possible. This is definitely a darker, more violent, more vicious Marvel character than I think anyone's ever seen before.
Right.
Needless to say, Ruben was doing nothing to help the discussion, basically confirming everyone's worst fears when the film was finally announced as PG-13 1 month before the film's release. And what was Ruben's response when fans were angered that Sony went back on their word after initially hinting at a hard R-rated movie? He was surprised. Yeah, imagine teasing your fans over and over again, promising something was going to happen and acting baffled when they find out that that something wasn't going to happen.
You gotta be kidding me.
And even worse, even after all that supposedly hardcore violence, Ruben still wasn't sure if the film would be PG-13 or not. Here's what he said in an interview with Screen Rant. "We're curious to see where it'll land, but we pushed the envelope as far as we possibly could in terms of just making it the most true to the comics version of the film that we could. He's a character that goes around biting people's heads off and eating brains, so we tried to respect that as much as we could. Except you didn't. No heads were bitten off, not visibly anyway. No limbs were dismembered, barely any blood. There was one token F-bomb. That's it. Anything that Ruben indicated was pushing the envelope may as well have been pushed right off the screen, because wherever that stuff went, it's not in the movie. And wouldn't you know it? Apparently footage was left out of the movie. Yeah, 40 minutes of it in fact, according to none other than Tom Hardy himself. And how did he describe them? There are like 30 to 40 minutes worth of scenes that aren't in this movie. All of them. Mad puppeteering scenes, dark comedy scenes, you know what I mean? They just never made it in. So where did they go? Why would these so-called puppeteering dark comedy scenes be left out? The answer is simple. Sony never had any intention of making an R-rated Venom film. It only suggested the idea of an R-rated Venom in hopes to entice hardcore Marvel fans to pony up their cash to go buy tickets and see the movie when it came out. By the time the film neared release, Sony left the filmmakers to deal with the brunt of the bad PR once the PG-13 rating was ousted by the media. In a way, I'm disgusted that I myself fell for this tactic, even knowing going into this film that it was going to be an absolute dumpster fire. And in a way, I also feel bad for Ruben being forced into this mess in the first place. Almost. But let's not forget that there was more than one key figure involved in this film, and I truly believe that the next person I bring up is a key figurehead in the Venom film turning out the way it did, if not outright responsible for it. Who do you notice at the top of the producers list on the film's Wikipedia page? Well, none other than former Marvel Studios CEO himself, Avi Arad, known for such classics as Fantastic Four, Hulk, Daredevil, Elektra, and Ghost Rider. Since the PG-13 rating had been announced, Avi has made some rather interesting comments, along with his fellow parakeet producer Matt Tolmach. Let's see what they had to say, shall we? To me, R is not a consideration. Can you get away with not R so that other people can see? So that younger people can see? I made an animated show. There was a lot of Venom in there. It was in 94. There's no reason to put in violence. To define what Venom is as violence, he's not. He's the lethal protector, which is a very different thing. We want to be really true to the comics. Today, in CGI and stuff, we can make Venom bite your head, but we don't have to show the head going side to side like that actually tastes good. It's irrelevant. What relevant is that you finally understood? Is that a bad guy? Yeah!
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. God have mercy on your soul.
First of all, R-rated superhero movies are nothing new. Hell, Avi produced some himself. Blade 1, Blade 2, Blade Trinity, and Punisher and its sequel Warzone. Shouldn't he, of all people, know that a superhero movie can be rated R and still be successful? Why else would he have made all those sequels? Second, all those fans who watched the Spider-Man show growing up, they're all done growing up now. They're adults, and they want to see a true version of Venom, one that isn't held back by a PG-13 rating. Third, bad guy? Okay, I get that Venom could be considered bad because he bites people's heads off and all that, but it's not like he's doing it to innocent civilians in the movie. He only gnaws out their noggins because the real bad guys of the film are hunting him down. Guys who, I should point out, were involved in human experimentation as clearly shown in this trailer. I mean, seriously, Avi, did you even see the movie? But the stupidity doesn't end there. Let's look at what Matt Tolmach had to say about the rating. We came into this production and the development of the movie wanting to make a movie that was true to Venom, true to the comics, true to the character, but at the same time as a movie that 13 and 14-year-olds can see. We had to push right up against it. We're 15 plus in England. It's not like we just wanted to make a family film. We wanted to push it as hard as we could, but also to make it accessible. That was always the goal.
We're dying. We're dying. We need money.
I really think there's something wrong with Sony and the people they're hiring. At some point in the past few years, they all decided to put on a pair of rose-tinted kitty glasses and just decided they were done making quality licensed products. If you need more proof, look no further than Stephen King's The Dark Tower. Now, I'll confess first by saying that I never saw this movie, nor have I read the official books. But I am aware that, much like Marvel Comics, the Dark Tower series has a rabid fan base that was itching for a genuinely authentic and kick-ass film series. They had to deal with so many false promises, so much hemming and hawing, so much development hell for so many years it almost seemed like it was never going to happen. But Sony finally managed to stop dragging its heels and began production, promising everything to the moon and back. Fans were going to get sequels, they were going to get a TV series, they were finally going to see a true version of the Dark Tower at long last. Sound familiar? Gee, I wonder why The Dark Tower wasn't successful. Maybe because Sony barely marketed the film worth a damn, butchered the source material, and toned it down just so the kids could handle it. Don't take my word for it, look what Stephen King himself had to say about it. The major challenge was to do a film based on a series of books that's really long, about 3,000 pages. The other part of it was the decision to do a PG-13 feature adaptation of books that are extremely violent and deal with violent behavior in a fairly graphic way. That was something that had to be overcome. This seems to be a running theme with Sony, and most movie studios in general. They take whatever the original content resembled, chew it up, and spit it out for the masses to consume. But here's the thing, the average moviegoer doesn't care about The Dark Tower. Hell, I myself didn't even know The Dark Tower existed as a series until fans outraged over the film. Maybe if there was a greater attempt at marketing King's franchise, or at least maintaining a respectable budget, the film would have seen greater success. The same is true for Venom. Most moviegoers simply don't know about Venom, but you know what they do know? Marvel. Audiences have had 10 years of exposure to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so when they see that in association with Marvel logo in theater trailers, they go, oh, awesome, a new Marvel movie. Can't wait to see that. They don't bother to stop and look at the fine print at the top that gives everything away. Now, with all that said, Venom isn't a box office failure. It's grossed back more than 3 times its budget so far, and will likely be on track to earn more money for Sony in the coming weeks ahead. But if this half-baked version of Venom is the best Sony can do for its Marvel universe, I can honestly say I'm not impressed. I think the marketing blunders in the trailers, the misleading comments made by the filmmakers about the film's rating, and the overall quality of the film itself say exactly everything fans need to know. Sony does not care about how good the movie is. It doesn't care about creating an accurate representation of the Venom we know and love from the comics. All Sony cares about is making money. And that's fine. Sony has every right to want a multi-million-dollar project of theirs to succeed financially. As I said before, I wanted to support Venom more than any other Marvel movie to date. But you have to take into consideration, this is the same company who helped fund the Spider-Man game that came out last month on PS4, which has received massive critical acclaim, and to my knowledge is the fastest selling exclusive on the console. Now I know that Insomniac Games was the actual team who made it, and that Sony's gaming division is separate from the film division, but Sony as an entity still had the understanding to give Insomniac complete creative freedom to develop a kick-ass game that Spider-Man fans would love. Columbia Pictures and Sony Interactive are polar opposites, and it frustrates me because I know that Columbia Pictures is capable of producing better things than this.
Like a turd in the wind.
All I can say is good luck. You had a golden opportunity to establish a Marvel universe that was different from the one fans already have, a chance to make a darker, edgier version of Marvel characters we know and love, separated from the Disney-fied characters we have right now. For crying out loud, you had Tom Hardy. Tom freaking Hardy! All you had to do was show Eddie Brock becoming infected with his symbiote, coming to terms with his powers, and kicking ass. That's all you needed to do. This film should have been idiot-proof, but somehow Sony still managed to screw it up, just as it has with The Dark Tower and most other licensed properties before it. I have no hopes for the future of this so-called Marvel Universe, and I hope any fans of any franchise licensed under Sony and Columbia Pictures will think twice before spending their hard-earned money on this tripe. This isn't the first time they pulled this stunt off, and it definitely will not be the last.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
I mean, seriously. Morbius? Morbius? That's your next big moneymaker, Sony? Morbius?